Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Voice Coffee Break. I've been pretty touched by what's been going on in the US the past couple of weeks. As many of you might have already seen in the voice community, we've decided to move Voice Global, which was due to happen next week, out by another couple of weeks in respect of the private funeral that's going to be held for George Floyd. And in all of my reading and all of the discussions that I've been having with people and colleagues in the industry, I've been really spurred to try and dig deeper into how do we build more diversity into the voice industry at large, and how can we be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. So over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be endeavoring to have some conversations with people who are working in the space from different backgrounds to try and have a more diverse picture of what's going on in our industry and in our world, and how do we make sure that we do what we believe voice should really be there for, which is to build better experiences that improve human life all over the world for every color, background, and nation. So I hope that this conversation in this episode will be helpful. During this next half hour, you're going to hear some really great insights from someone that's been working in this space for a long time. That's Noel Silver, most recently of NPR, before that Microsoft, and was there at the birth of Alexa when she worked at Amazon. And in this next half hour, we're going to talk about the world of voice, what we can be doing to make it a more diverse workplace, what's going on more broadly than that in the tech industry, and how can we make sure that we're hiring and building companies that really do respect everyone of all backgrounds. So I hope you enjoy this conversation, and if you are yourself someone from a minority background that is working and leading in voice and would be interested in having another conversation to add your perspective and to elevate your voice in this conversation, then do reach out, drop a comment, leave a like, let me know what you think of this, and enjoy these insights from Noelle, and please engage in this conversation. There's never been a more important time for it, and I'm glad that we're doing it. So here it is, my chat with Noel Silver on this week's Voice Coffee Break. Hope you get something really positive out of this. Okay, welcome back to another episode of Voice Coffee Break with me, James Poulter. And on this episode, we're going to be talking all about diversity in voice, both in terms of the bigger industry as well as also in our design. And I'm joined this week with Noel Silver from the AI Leadership Institute. Noel, why don't you just give a little intro to who you are and what you do?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a pleasure. I've been in voice for a really long time, relatively. I started off with Alexa. And the nice thing about that is it was just a baby little product. We were a team of about 10, but I grew up with it. And I have two people in my home that I'm very passionate about. My son, who has Down syndrome, my dad, who's aging and has, some cognitive issues. And it really drove my participation in the voice space and continues to drive it to this day. And so I started the AI Leadership Institute because I, as a practitioner, love building skills. I've built over 100 skills on Alexa, but I realized that someone somewhere has to decide that that's important for a company, and it often isn't the person building the skills. So I started that organization in order to bring more value to the world. And of course, Women in AI was added very quickly when I noticed, as we'll talk about in this session, that some things are often missing. And sometimes it's diversity of ethnicity, and sometimes it's gender. And so I wanted to do my part.
You've worked in you've worked in the technology industry for a good amount of time, and in many different roles, and really risen through the ranks to lead, entire teams and departments in quite a wide and, in a different use of the word, diverse set of, places, from public service radio to, kind of major technology corporations and alike. What has your experience as a person who've come from a diverse background? You've come through an industry at a time that hasn't always been particularly helpful in adding to those diversity issues, particularly in Silicon Valley and Seattle and on the East Coast where you are now. Those are not always been the bastions of diverse thinking, both particularly at a senior leadership level. What has that meant for you in your career in recent years?
Yeah, I mean, it's really unfortunate. One of the things that I try to do is inspire hope and get people not to quit, because we're doing a pretty good job these days of getting people to get into tech that are, not white, basically, right? Any, whether white or male, which is the predominant kind of demographic of our development teams right now.
Yeah,
And
I'll just go, by the way.
Yeah. And we're doing a great job of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's lots of diversity in those teams. The challenge, though, now I find is keeping people. And so what I've done over my career, I actually heard Nina Totenberg. She's one of the correspondents at NPR that I have listened to for, won't even say how long, but for a very long time. And she said something that really resonated with me. And she said, we're a part of the suck it up generation, and I don't know if that's Gen X, but it certainly has just been my life where I have literally battled misconceptions about my capability my entire career. Oh crap! Sorry. That's my voice bottle.
There you go. On brand. Nice.
Yeah, on brand. That's right. But I've battled these challenges my entire career. Every company I've left has often been because I call it wing clipping. Like somebody has come and said, as great as you are and as awesome as you are, don't do that. Don't say that. Sit down, be quiet, do this lesser job. And I've hired people who look like my bosses and watch them get promoted around me, which is always a sign that your time at that company is coming to an end.
Yeah.
Or at least it is for me. But again, because we're part of this suck it up generation, so many people just suck it up. Like they're just like, this is the lot we have in life. It's unfortunate. And so that's what I think is coming to a head right now is eventually like it builds and you're just like, enough is enough. I know I'm not doing this. I am not that way. I don't fight with anger. I fight with, just like you're attempting to do, right? Building compassion and understanding and love. But many people, like, they're done because they're done doing more work than their peers to get less recognition, to get less promotions. Yeah. And we're working harder. Like it's a inversely proportionate challenge. So I've struggled with it my whole career. I've just sucked it up. And I think I'm not the only one probably out there that feels that way, sadly.
And I think you're absolutely right that we're seeing that kind of end to that pent up, suck it up kind of factor kind of bubbling over right now.
Yeah.
And that the voices that are speaking up and speaking out against what's been going on, many of them from significant, those who have managed to break through, who have managed to make the tops of their industries, but even them sharing that they still feel somewhat lesser or have been treated in somewhat lesser ways. I'm particularly thinking of this past couple of days here in the UK, John Boyega, the kind of lead actor of, I have a Lego figure of him behind me. Star Wars. I know him well. Star Wars is Finn. Speaking out in Hyde Park at one of the major rallies and talking about how he just can't take it anymore, and you think, but he's made it to the very top of his industry, and yet he still feels like that, and that just can't go on. So I think the reason I wanted to have these conversations, and we're going to have more of them with other people working in the industry, is really to do exactly as what we're trying to do across the world right now, which is to build that empathy and understanding. Because I'm aware that I come from a position of like so much white privilege I have never even acknowledged, but I've never even had to think about acknowledging. It's not just the known unknown, it's the unknown unknown of that. Right. That I am able to go out, and I live on a fairly on the edge of a fairly rough estate in southeast London, but in a nice building on the edge of a southeast London estate. I have I lead a technology company that works in this space and have the means to do so. There are so many layers of that on top of one another. So I suppose maybe just talk a little bit about how in particular you're reacting in the past couple of weeks to these protests, and particularly being in DC and seeing what's been done, tear gassing people in front of the White House to go and do a photo op is a pretty hard thing, I think, for any of us to deal with. You guys must be seeing it pretty close at hand right now. How's that been?
Yeah. I mean, it's terrible. It's overwhelming. For people handle it very different ways. So I'll certainly share how I handle it, which is very different than I think many people are handling it. But I have peers that are like, I am, I'm hurt. I'm going to be hurt for a long time. Like, this is not like going to just go away. Yeah. And I look back and look at these waves of when we hit this breaking point. And it's so frustrating to know we are right in that moment right now which is where I come from a place of like, how do I do systemic change? It's literally what drove me to move away from like working at NPR and doing the classic, like climb the ladder, be a VP, maybe a CTO one day, and think, you know what, there's a different way that I can make an impact. And I had to make a very hard decision to make sure that I was doing the right thing, that I could 10 years from now, when my kids were like, what were you doing back then? I could be like, you know what? I decided to quit my like wonderful pie in the sky vision of this world I wanted and get my hands dirty and be part of an organization. It's called Hacker USA, that wants to change education, that wants to be, you know, like now we have to do education different. No one's going to sit in a hall of 150 people anymore. So
not anytime soon.
That's right. So I, as someone who's like good on video and like, you know, like I feel like this is a place that I can make an impact and I can attract people that look like me into these fields of data science, data analytics, where that's just not the case. And so what I don't want to have happen is we get not lost, but we get caught up in the emotion of this moment. And then I lose a generation of women, of minorities who then can't see themselves where I am because of this situation. And so, so I'm going, and the sad part about that is that as I do that, people are quick to judge that I'm not angry or I'm not, you know, like I'm not reacting the way, I'm not protesting, I'm changing my job and moving, you know, like I'm reacting differently and I come from a different place. And my ask of everyone is that in addition to gaining empathy on the situation, like also it's okay to not react in anger. And it doesn't mean we're not angry. It doesn't mean we're not sad. It doesn't mean that we're not impacted by the situation. But everyone deserves the space to process and take action the way that they want to. And I think there's a lot of judgment in this heated fed upness that we're all dealing with. That's right, there's a lot of judgment on like, how are you reacting and what are you doing? And not a lot of discussion about the vast ways we could make a difference. And then at the end of the day, it's going to have to be systematic change. We have to change the leadership within companies. Every company that I've ever left, it was the leadership that made me leave.
Right.
It was like this band of people who could not see someone like me being where they were.
Right.
And that's what has to go away.
And you know, that's interesting because talk to me a little bit about that kind of issue of leadership particularly in the technology field. You know, we've got a situation with, you know, you've got Satya, you've got Sundar, you've got people who have come from, you know, who have come from quite humble beginnings in many cases and also fought through a number of those issues. Okay, admittedly, they've not come from you know, particularly either African American or, you know, kind of Black Caribbean backgrounds, and that still is a problem. You know, there is no top tech CEO that, you know, I can name offhand that is coming necessarily directly from those backgrounds. So, but talk about those tech leaders and what you see across the board at the moment in terms of leadership. What is it going to take for us to get some, you know, kind of senior representation with a truly diverse background up to those levels? Like, where is that cutoff point that we're not hitting right now?
I mean, it's very hard in Titanic-like organizations, even Microsoft. Like, I was so inspired to join that organization because of someone like Satya, who said all the right things and was doing the right things. Like, it seemed great, but he owns like 200,000 employees, some of which have been there for decades, who are part of leadership organizations that do not agree with the way that he is. And it's a dilemma, right, for them. Like, they don't think the way he does, but if they say that or in any way overtly communicate that, they'll get let go, right, which has been done. And so now there's this like passive aggressive, they still feel that way, they still act that way, but on paper or even in conversations with their leadership, they're like, yeah, I'm all for the diversity and give me that, you know, unconscious bias education. But the reality is, I mean, there are class action lawsuits against Microsoft by groups of people that are like, you can't treat us this way. And like, I didn't know that until I left, like until I started researching, like, how could I be the only one who feels like I just got fired for no reason other than the fact that I wasn't white and I wasn't a guy and I wasn't there 10 years. Like, there was this coveted, and I think this is in many organizations, Amazon included, this boys club / white privileged club that's like, it's super hard to get into. I remember sitting in an all hands at Amazon and someone asked Jeff Bezos, why isn't there a female or a minority in your executive team? And they're like, we're looking as hard as we can. If you find one, let us know.
Right.
And to this day, that hasn't happened, but it is impossible for the entire world not to have a single Black person that could serve as an executive on one of these, in any of these companies. Like, beyond understanding. So I think once someone told me a very sad fact, which was an entire generation of people have to go away for this to change. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, that can't be true.
No,
because that means I have to wait 20 years for that to be better. It can't be true. But it's things like this, right? It's like a mindset that will not shift, that it becomes more realistic to think, maybe those people have to retire, have to leave the workforce. They won't change the way they think, so they have to go away. But the good news is at least we have generations following, a generation of mindful leaders, of socioeconomic focused leaders that are coming up. And that's who I want to train. That's who I want to bring into the industry. But for goodness sakes, it stinks to think we have to wait for them.
Absolutely. Well, let me just remind those that might be watching. If you're not sure, you are watching an episode of Voice Coffee Break with me, JP, from Vixen Labs, and I'm talking with Noel Silver from the AI Leadership Institute and Women in AI, and we're talking all about the voice industry, the technology industry at large, and how diversity might play into the future of that, particularly in the wake of what's happened in the past few weeks. I want to talk specifically now about voice, Noelle. You've been leading in this space, as you say. You've been there since the earliest days of the Alexa team being born. Being the midwife to Alexa coming into the world, if you like. And I don't know what we would hold, a baby Echo. On a Raspberry Pi or something, like being
the good old tap.
Exactly. Rest in peace. So you've been there since those earliest days, and then come through and worked in some of the biggest companies. Been around the team with Cortana. Obviously thinking about content and how we represent content on the NPR front, and obviously everything you're doing with Women in AI. I think that the thing that I often hear for the evangelists in the market, in the voice space, and I think we've been guilty of saying this as well, all of us, is voice is colorblind. It's a colorblind medium. There's no visuals to worry about, right? So great, there's no gendering there. There's no racial bias there.
I have never said that.
I know you've never said that. I think I might be guilty of saying that at some point. I certainly know that I've got peers who are.
Yeah, for sure.
And I suppose on first instance, you can understand why people make that leap, right? It's like, a voice, there's no race there. That's great. And I just feel like this is one of the things that struck me the most the past couple of weeks, is just how wrong that is.
Right.
And I think I'm waking up to what that fact looks like, but maybe just in your own kind of thinking, like why is that a wrong way of thinking about this industry, and what are we going to do about it to make sure that this doesn't become the product of the same problem that we've seen other mediums in the past have similar issues?
I do see a world in the future where not everybody is funneled through an Alexa or a Google, and that brands, even today, we start to see this with cars and BMW creating joy and having their own virtual assistant. And so the more of these virtual assistants and the more natural language engines that we build, we have to be more diverse in our collection of that data. But even then, just collecting that data is enough, because then there is someone, a data analyst or a data wrangler, whatever you want to call them, that's going to select the data that they choose to use for training and testing the model. And that person or team or people also needs to have diversity in their perspective and the diversity in the way that they think. And, and then the person that deploys the model, the person that tests the model, the person that is marketing, diversity has to exist at every single phase in order for some one individual or team of individuals to be like, that's not, that's not important.
That's not okay.
Or, or just not even be aware. I don't think anyone on Alexa, and certainly as I went to Microsoft, we had the same problem with computer vision. No one intentionally was like, oh, we should disenfranchise this entire collection of the world. It's bad for business. Nobody wants to do that. But if everyone looks the same, thinks the same, talks the same, when you finish with your product, you're all going to look at it and go, that's amazing, and not realize that you completely missed the mark. And so that was what was taught to me when I went to Marshawn Lynch, and he's like, Alexi, Alexa, Alexis, all these different ways of saying the name. It was just interesting to me that we did not have any data or any way of making sure that demographic was understood. So that day I became extremely passionate. And that's why even before all of this happened, every conversation I have, I'm always talking about diversity of thought within a team, because it's those things that make products scalable
Yeah.
across a world. We're not building things just for the US or just for the UK anymore.
No, absolutely. I was in a call yesterday as we record. This is we're recording on a Friday, 5th of June, and so this week we were having a discussion as part of the leadership team of the Open Voice Network, which is being led by John Steen and the team over there, and which I think is going to be a really promising initiative to try and open up some of these kind of issues, particularly around the ethics. And we got into talking about some of the problems around, different diverse lexicons, around, grammar, syntax. It's not just what the device is hearing, but it's also the words in which it's trying to interpret.
That's right. What it's being mapped to.
Exactly. That kind of intent handling is really huge. And I was watching a YouTube video yesterday from one of the music producer that I follow on YouTube regularly, a guy called Justin Henderson, or some people might know him as Henny the Business on YouTube, a great YouTuber. And he was talking about, he grew up in a black family, but in a majority white neighborhood, and spent the majority of his kind of like latter teen years on the golf course playing with his friends, trying to kind of fit in middle school. And essentially whenever he would then go back into majority black communities and be around his friends, they would be like, "Oh, you speak so white."
Yeah.
And that just struck me. Yeah, right. And that just struck me because I live in an interesting part of South London where if I kind of go the right direction down the road, I'm going to be the one that sticks out in terms of the way in which I speak against the rest of them.
Yeah.
And it just got me thinking about, it's like, what should we be doing as an industry to make sure that these big AIs take into account a diverse culture, both black and every other background and ethnicity? And how do we better represent kind of black culture in the design of our experiences that we're working on? When we're building applications, when we're building content, how do we make sure that we don't end up with that kind of scripting bias
That's right.
in what we build? What can we do to fix that?
And I think it comes down to right now, for example, I was super inspired by Harry Shum, who is the head of research and development at Microsoft, setting up this, there's this partnership on AI and there's these tenants, and it sounds amazing. And you get all, excited and you're like, yes, these are the things that will protect exactly these types of concerns. The challenge, though, is like who on the team is empowered to pull the chain and be like, stop this train, do not pass go, do not make $1 million. Like, this is not okay. And I find that putting teeth into those things, unfortunately, that is held by this layer of management who does not think there's a problem, right? Who does not think
they don't even see it.
They don't even see it, which is sad in a way, but also creates huge frustration in those of us who do see it, because it's hard to convince somebody of something, right? It's like trying to convince someone that there's, anything that you believe in, any value. You cannot have someone, you can't force someone to believe something they don't believe.
Right.
They have to come to that realization on their own. And if they don't think anything's wrong, it's a very difficult situation to be in. And then those engineers who want to stop the train have no power to do so. Even if they say it, I have records, like a naive person, I'm taking down all these emails and snapshots of Slack as people are like fighting to, and then I'm like, what am I going to do with that? Like, I am literally at the top of the people who care list.
Right.
Everyone I send this to is like, thank you for sending that along. I appreciate your feedback. We'll take it under consideration. So
do we need more? Do we need more whistleblowing? Do we need more exposure? Because that's one thing that I see right now going on, is that like within the reaction to what happened with the George Floyd incident last week, it's like, I think it's for the first time that many people who have been feeling this way for the first time since, Dr. King feel like they suddenly have the permission to raise a hand and expose those, in some cases, really small injustices and some of the really big ones. Like, what is it that we need to be saying to leaders who are in these positions to be doing right now to kind of get out?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, though, what does the accountable leader do? This is why I've got very passionate about mindful leadership and what that means. Like, how do you actually do something? Because so many times I whistleblow, if you want to call it that way, but I escalate concerns that are valid and real, and investigations are started. But I've never, ever seen anything happen. I've never seen a person who I literally have a smoking gun of here's the bad behavior that they have done, and nothing happens. They don't get fired. They don't get removed from their position of power. And then the sad thing is that because they are not because it's not corrected, their empowerment grows. And whether that's malicious or not, who knows, but they are more empowered because they're like, oh, this is good. What I'm doing is nothing happened. And it's worse because as a leader, I now put my name on those things. Before I'd be like, I want an anonymous thing. I don't want to get, I don't want to have any kind of backhanded retribution of tattling on my boss. Now I'm a leader and I say it out loud and I put my name on it and it still doesn't matter. So this is where you get to a point where you're just like, I'm out. I can't fight this good fight in this company anymore. And you leave. And this is why I'm passionate about, like, how do I get these people to stay? How do we put teeth in these types of things? And maybe it's like you as a company are held accountable by another organization, right, or by a consortium. And we're just so new in voice that we just don't have these things built yet.
The structures just aren't there
yet.
We're
starting, right? We're starting these things. But we need someone from the outside who's going to be like, you don't have to go to the New York Times, but somebody needs to say out loud.
But some kind of, racial diversity, kind of board or something like that that's looking and holding these guys accountable, I think is.
Yeah. And across there's so many ethical challenges. Diversity of ethnicity is one, gender is another.
Absolutely.
But even just diversity of thought, accessibility, there's so many things that we know better and we're not making better choices.
Right.
And it's just because no one's holding at the end of the day, they're going to make more money regardless.
Right.
Right. If they don't serve my dad or my son, they're like, oh, that's unfortunate. But there's a new generation of leaders, I believe, I'm part of that generation, that are not going to do that, are not going to move a product to market if it doesn't serve people in the way that it should. And these topics will be at the heart of them. But it will take, I think, some systematic changes to create an opportunity for those leaders to get elevated in these companies. Because right now, we don't even want to get started on the token chief diversity officer. Why wouldn't that person actually be an officer of the company? Why couldn't it, why does the black person
Don't give them a title to do that. Just give them one of the other jobs that are already there.
Can't they be a marketer? Can't they be, a technology officer, an information officer? Why create it? But it's a symbol of the challenge is that we think that that's the solution, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. Now you can say, oh, we do have diversity in our board. We do have diversity, but their job is diversity. And it's the person that's being, they represent the people that are being oppressed. It doesn't make sense to me.
No, absolutely.
So we have to make some different systematic changes. And I'm still thinking about what can I do as a leader to make those changes. Right now I'm focusing on getting the right mindset into people joining the workforce.
Yeah, filling up the funnel with people that can come through the process.
But how do we change their mindset at the top? That's a whole nother thing.
It's a big one. I think it's one that we're going to try and tackle as hard as we can in the coming months with the conferences and with our events that are coming up. Mm-hmm. I want to round out this conversation just with maybe a bit of personal advice. I'm stood here as, in London as a leader of a company and, trying to run a business, trying to hire the right people, and many others in the space are, as I reached out to a few folks that I knew to set up these conversations, as we were speaking before, I was trying to think of, who can I go and talk to? And I had 3 or 4 names that I could go and name, and I thought, well, that's good. But I could probably name, if it was any other topic, another 50 names that I would be able to go and talk to, because I can't talk to them about this because they won't have a background that can understand it. And that's a problem. And that's the leaders that I can think of, let alone going down the rungs into those organizations and companies to, the talent pool that we can go and hire from, the people that we can collaborate with.
That's right.
So, as someone who is, kind of a white CEO in the voice space in 2020, in the light of what's going on, what advice would you give for someone like myself and others in our positions to help stand up for, diverse culture, and be hiring the right people? What steps would you be recommending to folks?
Yeah, I'll say it's probably two-prong advice. One is just self-awareness, increasing your self-awareness of knowing what's right, what's wrong, what your values are. I think spending time developing that is important. And unfortunately, there's no shortcut. There's no book, no podcast you can listen to. Like, it's literally just, yeah, it's like being quiet and like understanding what you value as a person. And then, becoming more self-aware of like how you feel, because what ends up happening, and I just am shocked that this is not more often the case, but if I'm in a meeting, I know when something's wrong because I'm very self-aware. I know my body knows like what was just said to that person, that microaggression, like it triggers something in me. The next step is that I say something. But if it doesn't even trigger in you, you can't help.
Right.
So you have to generate some level, like you have to just continuously, and this is part of that like mindful leader in you, everyone just needs to spend more time so that when they hear oppression, they can do something.
Right.
And then when you do, it's that whole, see something, say something. My entire career, bad things have happened right in front of people.
Right.
To me. And people will come to me after and be like, wow, that was pretty crappy. Are you okay?
Yeah.
And I'm like, always say, yeah, I'm fine. It's good.
The Good Samaritan paradox, right? Is, everyone focuses on the person that comes and helps, but forgets about the 25 that walked past them a minute beforehand.
That's right. And honestly, I don't need you to ask me like if I'm okay.
Yeah.
What I need you to do is in that meeting or go talk to that person, or better yet, report it. Like, people need to get, it's like a 5-year-old. They need to get in trouble. Right. They need to understand that there are consequences to behaving badly. You can't say, I don't like the sound of that person's voice. And the only distinction between their voice and someone else is that they aren't the color of your skin. They come from a different background. You can't keep someone in your organization because they're not white and they look good on paper and your org chart looks nice and round because you have a brown person in it. You can't do that and get away with it. But today, I watch it every day. I watch people take advantage and not call it out. And so but you can't, like I said, I don't hold people accountable if you don't even know. So spend
start
some time
with awareness,
in the
right?
quiet. Yeah. Start with mindful meditation. Just understand who you are, what you value, and then practice that awareness in every conversation that you have.
That's great. Noelle, this has been such a helpful conversation, not just for me personally, but I'm sure that many watching are also going to be really challenged by what you've had to say. If people want to follow up and want to get in touch with you, where do they go? Where can they do that?
Yeah, the best thing to do is connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you can, in your message, just be like, oh my gosh, I saw you live, or I saw the replay, just so I know where we met. But yeah, I would very much enjoy it. I'm always posting content more and more now. And I do my own LinkedIn lives every so often. It's been crazy with the kids, but I'm trying to do more content.
Good for you.
But I love this. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. No, thanks so much. And we look forward to carrying on this conversation and joining us back soon. Noelle, thanks so much. You can go find out more about the AI Leadership Institute over also on LinkedIn, Twitter, and everywhere else, and also Women in AI. So I encourage everybody who's watching to do that. Go follow Noelle. She's got some good content for you to tuck into. And I'll see you again very soon on another episode of Voice Coffee Break. Thanks so much.